It's a bizarre story. It doesn't particularly inspire me with confidence that the President of the United States is hiding in a catering truck, but I do think it's worth paying tribute to our journalistic colleagues who have actually brought this up.
Islamic Republic of Iran right now, if the president is forced to hide in a catering truck by this country he's been at war for months.
If you're so eager to make this point, then why the hell did Donald Trump put his life in danger by going on a Qatari plane that wasn't outfitted with the proper things to defend him in the first place?
Point stands that the Iranians would have tried to kill President Trump and are trying to kill President Trump, despite everything that Tara just said. I don't even necessarily disagree with you about the Qatari plane.
He wasn't cowering in a catering truck.
Well, you couldn't see him.
He wasn't. I mean, he was using that as a vehicle to get to another plane for security purposes.
No. He had to have his new toy. He had to have his Qatari bride plane. And against the
Iranians would have still tried to kill President Trump if he was on the original Air Force One.
So the Iranians have been trying to kill lots of presidents and people for years.
The Strait of Hormuz, which has been this nexus for everything, still remains this piece of the puzzle that we are not able to get control over.
The Iranian regime is in shambles, as you say. Why is it that the president keeps shifting his position?
Those goals have been accomplished.
Guys, what if the man who loves to portray himself as brave and fearless was whisked out of Turkey using an airport catering truck? MAGA Pundits tried to defend this act by Trump last night on Abby Phillip show, but got utterly humiliated by the other panelists. Let's see what actually happened during the show, and I'll share my thoughts as we go.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm John Berman in for Abby Phillip, and we do begin with breaking news. An elaborate secret plan to get President Trump out of Turkey following the NATO summit last month, following a credible threat against him. According to the Washington Post, it was an Iranian assassination threat against the president that prompted this really extraordinary operation. Now, Trump had originally boarded Air Force One. By the way, the old Air Force One, they'd already sent the Qatari jet, out of there. He boarded the old Air Force One. Then the Post reports that Trump and several aides were shuffled into this airport catering truck, which then transported the president to a smaller military jet. So Air Force One and the White House and media members on board were essentially used as a decoy. The paper notes that the maneuver meant that Trump's actual location was concealed from the American public and many senior U.S. officials for hours. It's still not clear how Trump was transported from the other plane back onto Air Force One after it landed, but he did get back on it when seen coming down the stairs just before 11 p.m. Since the incident, the president's made a bunch of contradicting statements about what happened there. There are really two issues here. Number one, which is, I think at this point a little bit on the back burner, is the whole Qatari jet, Air Force One, which was given to the United States. That was shipped out like the night before, and the president claimed, it turns out quite dishonestly, that plane was going to visit troops, U.S. troops in Germany and whatnot who wanted to see it. That appears to have not been true, doubly now. So now you have this elaborate plan to hide him on this other plane. And I just want to read you a couple tweets from Tommy Vietor, who worked in the Obama administration in the National Security Council. He wrote, quote, "This makes Trump look like both a liar and a scared little bee," rhymes with witch. Then he also writes, "The mental image of Trump hiding from Iran in a catering cart is devastating. A weak, stupid old man hiding from the consequences of his own decision while endangering others." Tara?
Well, true. However, this was a national security situation of his own making, to Tommy's point. None of this rigmarole would have happened if Trump had just stayed on the real Air Force One that is completely outfitted with all of the bells and whistles and protection measures and defense measures that were necessary to protect the president of the United States. But no, he had to have his new toy, he had to have his Qatari bride plane, and against the
Iranians would have still tried to kill President Trump if he was on the original Air Force One.
So the Iranians have been trying to kill lots of presidents and people for years.
That doesn't make it okay.
Let Tara go.
No. Okay. So here, you know what? To your point, since you're so eager to make this point, then why the hell did Donald Trump put his life in danger by going on a Qatari plane that wasn't outfitted with the proper things to defend him in the first place, to protect him? So that sounds asinine, your logic. So if he had just done this and not used taxpayer money to waste taxpayer money to have his little new plane and show it off, make a big deal about it when it wasn't secure, none of this ever would have happened. It's a situation of his own making.
Jesse?
Yeah, I think the point stands that the Iranians would have tried to kill President Trump and are trying to kill President Trump despite everything that Tara just said. I don't even necessarily disagree with you about the Qatari plane, but it's totally divorced from the fact that the problem here is the Iranians trying to kill our president, yours and mine, whether we like it or not.
No, the problem
Let's
is that
not
he put
forget that
himself
the
in that
bad guys are the
situation.
terrorists trying to kill the president in this
Oh, my
equation.
goodness.
Yes, which
That
we would
doesn't
benefit
change.
from actually calling that out, right? I mean, this idea that there are two separate stories here. The news story, the transactional stuff that occurred, but the underlying threat from the Iranian government. This was not the first time that the Iranians tried to kill the president. Back in March, there was an individual who was caught and prosecuted over the same thing, being pushed through by the IRGC. One might argue, and I think that our friends on the left would argue this, that if it was a Democratic president, you would say this is an act of war.
Yemisi, go ahead.
I will say, as somebody who is a staffer that traveled with Biden on Air Force One, I'm okay with the security protocols because Secret Service would not do something like this unless it was very, very credible. But what was going to be the plan with the real life staffers and the media that were on the plane as a decoy? That to me feels like another piece of this that's a bit left out. But look, Republican president, Democratic president, it doesn't matter. I don't want to see our president killed by a foreign nation.
I think the answer is collateral damage, right? If the idea is to use it as a decoy, there's only one thing that happens to the decoy, right?
Yeah.
But the point
But let
is
me
this,
add one point to this, because Jason said there are two parts to this story. There are at least three, which is that the reason we're all sitting here discussing this is because of fantastic reporting from the Washington Post, then recently seconded by the New York Times, in the context of the Trump administration subpoenaing previously journalists from the New York Times who had reported on the Qatari jet. So the fact that we all know this now, it's a bizarre story. It doesn't particularly inspire me with confidence that the President of the United States is hiding in a catering truck, but I do think it's worth paying tribute to our journalistic colleagues who have actually brought this out.
I am always willing to give credit to the journalists there. Let me add a fourth.
Guys, Donald Trump often tries to act tough, but a recent event changed everything. Here's where it gets wild and hilarious. Last month, during the NATO summit in Ankara, Trump appeared to board an older Air Force One in front of the public cameras. People thought he was leaving Turkey on that plane. Trump even casually explained that he was doing it for old time's sake. However, newer reports suggest that wasn't the real reason behind the incident. U.S. intelligence agencies detected a serious threat from Iran against Trump. Reportedly, his security team immediately created a deception operation. Trump boarded the visible aircraft, but instead of leaving on it, he was transported through the airport inside a catering truck. That sounds like a movie scene, right? But according to reports, that's what happened. Now, Trump's changing explanation raises an even bigger question. What was he trying to hide? That catering truck reportedly took him to a smaller military plane, which secretly carried him to Britain. The larger Air Force One reportedly served as a decoy. Think about that image for a second. The President of the United States was reportedly being moved through an airport in a catering truck, while another plane was used to mislead potential attackers. Now let's be fair. Protecting a president from an assassination threat isn't cowardice. It's the intelligence agency and security service doing their job. If intelligence has credible information that the president could be targeted, you get him out. It's simple. But politically, the contrast is very striking. This MAGA boss has spent years building an image of fearlessness by acting tough. He mocks his opponents for being weak and cowardly. He presents himself as a hero and a savior, someone who never backs down. Yet, ironically, when the Iranian threat became personal, his security team had to create a decoy and move him to another aircraft using a catering truck. There's no doubt that the security operation was smart, but the problem lies in the explanation afterward. Why tell the public that the aircraft switch was about nostalgia when the real reason was a security threat? Some details need to remain classified, but there is a big difference between protecting sensitive information and giving Americans a completely different picture. Now that the actual details are coming out, Trump's original explanation looks much harder to defend. But here's the bigger issue. Trump didn't just face an Iranian threat. He and his administration helped create the tensions that led to this danger. Trump chose to escalate the conflict with Iran. He argued that Iran's nuclear program was too risky to ignore and that military force would solve the problem. Instead, the conflict created even more issues for the United States. U.S. forces attacked Iran, and Iran retaliated forcefully. The Gulf region became even less stable. Most importantly, the Strait of Hormuz was disrupted. This is a critical passage for roughly 20% of global oil supply. Iran closed this passage passage, energy prices skyrocketed, and American taxpayers ended up facing additional financial pressure for another major military operation. Now, let's connect the dots. The catering truck story isn't just an odd incident, it is a consequence of a conflict Trump chose to escalate, and that's where the situation gets much bigger than Trump himself.
Aspect to this story, this doesn't seem like a particularly weak Islamic Republic of Iran right now if the president is forced to hide in a catering truck by this country he's been at war with, for months. Right?
He wasn't cowering in a catering truck.
Well, you couldn't see him.
He wasn't. I mean, he was using that as a vehicle to get to another plane for security purposes, most likely, as you point out, because Secret Service said, this is the way we need to handle this. So it seems odd to frame it in that way. And the Tommy Vietor the tweets are absolute lunacy. I mean, that is a ridiculous way to frame a security protocol to protect the United States of America, almost as if they're goading him to go into situations in which there's another assassination attempt on his life. Okay. I don't know what the practical matter is of that, other than to try to shame him for not being the subject of an Iranian plot to murder him.
You're ignoring why the Secret Service had to make that change, why that he was put in that position, is because he did not take Air Force One, the original Air Force One, that is completely...
That's not true. But that's not true. That is factually inaccurate.
So we're
the
saying
folks that we were talking about, just one point.
Okay.
The folks that we're talking about, the so-called decoys, were on the old Air Force One. Right. So yes, they were there. So despite the fact that has the top-of-the-line security...
Before all of that, it was before all of that, he flew to Turkey.
They didn't target that plane.
No, you didn't the airplane, and he could not fly from back home from Turkey because that plane was not
that is not right.
Okay. That is not
I will say this. He did not listen to national security folks about that.
He certainly could not fly in the Qatari jet.
Right.
That's true. But they also determined he couldn't fly on the 747 that had been serving as Air Force One for some time. So they had to go to option C there. And Niall, just to my point, if we can just address this for 1 second. If not, you take out the cowering and a catering truck for Tommy Vietor, this is still the Iranians dictating actions by the President of the United States.
No. 100%. And also to the other point that you made, actions that the old Air Force One, the traditional Air Force One, was not formidable enough for them to feel safe traveling in. This, with all due respect to Tara, isn't really about the Qatari jet. It's about the fact that the dangers were apparently so acute that there was no plane that he could safely travel on and be known to be traveling on it. They took him off, or they decided against using the traditional Air Force One because he was under such threat from this nation that he sort of demeans as a minnow that has been overwhelmed by American military firepower.
Can we just rewind a hot sec? You said this is evidence that the Iranians are somehow stronger or more emboldened than we...
I didn't say than us. I just said...
than we anticipate.
And an emboldened Iran.
Sure. I disagree. I think that this is a regime that doesn't even have a supreme leader, okay, at this point. He's missing in action. We have no idea where this guy is. It's a weekend at Bernie's, weekend at Mojtabad situation over there in Tehran at this point.
So why is Trump hiding in a catering truck then?
Trump is hiding in a catering truck because we have an excess of security protocols that we go through our Secret Service.
So you think the Secret Service threw him in there just for the fun of it?
I think they did what they were doing.
And he's in danger from Iranian attack.
Absolutely. The Iranians are trying to kill our president. We're all in danger because of the Iranian terror regime. You too, even though you're Irish. They want you too.
Yeah, this is at a tennis match, looking back and forth here. Let me move this along ever so slightly and to follow off your point there, because if the Iranian regime is in shambles, as you say, why is it that the president keeps shifting his positions in negotiations with them? The Wall Street Journal reporting today that Trump has been laying the groundwork to declare victory, even floating the idea of walking away without a nuclear deal. This, Yemisi, is the low keying of negotiations with Iran. We'll just leave things as they are. They'll keep, the remnants of the nuclear program for now. What happens next?
I think,
Guys, it is hilarious to see whenever anything controversial, embarrassing, or bizarre happens to Trump, his MAGA pundits come out to defend him. They ignore reality, the bigger picture, and always support their MAGA leader no matter what. For everyday Americans, the main question is quite simple. What did this war actually achieve for the United States? Trump entered the conflict promising to destroy Iran's ability to become a nuclear power. But now, after all the military action for nearly 6 months, Trump is nowhere close to achieving the original target. Iran is showing continued resilience, and the underlying nuclear issues remain unresolved. And that's a significant problem for the United States. If the nuclear threat justified the war, shouldn't the nuclear issue be fully resolved before Trump pulls out? Instead, Washington is searching for an exit. Midterms are approaching, and Trump wants to leave without necessarily securing a solid nuclear agreement. And this creates a major contradiction to what he promised the American people. You can't spend months telling Americans that Iran's nuclear capabilities are in existential danger and then walk away without dealing with it? Where is the enriched uranium? Who has control over it? Can inspectors even verify it? And what stops Iran from rebuilding? These aren't minor details. They were the whole reason Trump said military action was necessary. Originally, Trump demanded the surrender of Iran's nuclear material, but now the Trump administration seems to be interested in negotiations and a withdrawal. This is where American families come into play. The cost of living go beyond bombs and fighter jets. The United States is spending tens of billions of taxpayer dollars on military operations, aircraft, intelligence, weapons, fuel, ships, and logistics. Billions can vanish into a war effort without most Americans ever seeing a receipt. But there is another cost that working class Americans can actually feel: energy bills. Guys, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the world's key oil routes. About a fifth of global oil supplies typically pass through this region. When the conflict disrupted that route, energy markets responded almost immediately. Oil prices rose significantly. Shipping costs jumped instantly, and those costs can ripple throughout an economy. So Americans ended up paying more for food, travel, gas, groceries, and everyday items. That's the part that dramatic footage of fighter jets and missiles rarely shows. War looks powerful on TV. Its economic effects are quieter, but devastating for household budgets. They show up at the gas pump. They show up at grocery stores. They show up on energy bills. And you know what? Trump started this escalation knowing Iran might retaliate and that Hormuz could be used as a weapon. Now, Americans are facing the consequences. Instead of addressing this issue diplomatically, Trump tried to use muscle and power, and this strategy backfired. So what is the end game now? Trump keeps claiming that America won. Fine, but how? What exactly did we win? Is Iran's nuclear material gone? Is Iran permanently stopped from enriching uranium in the future? Is the Strait of Hormuz open and secure for the world? Or did America just spend billions of dollars, escalate a regional conflict, disrupt energy markets, and then end up back at the negotiating table anyways? This president promised security to Americans, and instead, this conflict created another serious threat to his own security, reportedly forcing his team to secretly move him out of Turkey. He promised economic strength to Americans, yet the war led to huge military costs and energy pressure. He promised decisive action against Iran, yet Washington is now trying very hard to negotiate. And guys, that's why the Turkey incident matters so much. It reveals the gap between Trump's public image and the reality behind the scenes. You can't resolve an issue with bombing. Sooner or later, diplomacy returns. And finally, that's where Trump's administration seems to be heading now. The catering truck makes for a ridiculous headline, but the larger story is much more serious. Trump started this war promising a solution. The uglier truth is that he's trying to find a way out without admitting that the problem was never actually solved.
I think he's backpedaling and trying to get out of this. Domestically, we have midterms going on. We have the real domestic cost of this war. And politically, I don't think he's gained anything out of it. Internationally, we've frustrated our allies. People in the Middle East are wondering what we're going to continue to do here. The Strait of Hormuz, which has been this nexus for everything, still remains this piece of the puzzle that we are not able to get control over. And I also want to point out, nuclear, Strait of Hormuz, there's also a humanitarian element. We went into this country with the idea that we were also going to save people because this was a regime that was oppressing them. That will never come to fruition. I think every president, to be fair, every president has a dream about how to handle Iran. And time again, Iran proves that it cannot be handled by a country that actually has to focus on how its constituents feel.
Your political point, I think, is completely valid, and I think that's behind all of this. You get into the midterms, you do as little damage as humanly possible at this point. I don't know what that might even look like. and then you restart negotiations afterwards. To be clear, even in the Washington Post, I don't think the intention here is to say that we're going to allow them to now have nuclear capabilities. The question is pausing that aspect of this, declaring a victory that the American people will accept and the media will print, get through the midterms, and then move on.
How are we better off now than we were before?
Because Iran is weaker. They don't have a military. Yes, they are. They are.
You just made the point that they are capable of having a capable enough threat to the president of the United States. So which is it?
The goals
are two completely separate issues.
The goals at the outset of this conflict were twofold. Stop the Iranian nuclear program. They cannot have one. And then end the Iranian missile arsenal to the point where they can defend the recreation of that nuclear program. Those goals have been accomplished. So at this point, the question becomes, what do we do about the Strait of Hormuz? We're currently, if we look at where we are right now, we're actually getting 8 million. We're actually getting 8 million barrels of oil out of there a day. We're also getting 8.5 million through alternative pipelines that are going through there. That is contributing to the fact, along with our exports, we're producing a lot more exports. The South Americans are producing a lot more exports. It's $80 a barrel, and it's not 100. It's not 125. It's not 150 like you were projecting a few months ago at this same table.
Hang on, because we're going to move on here. I will say gas right now is $1 more than it was at the beginning of the war. The Strait of Hormuz is severely constricted. Yes, there is some oil getting through. Iran does have their enriched uranium, which they had at the beginning of the war. They still very much have the
under rubble
uranium. We think?
There's no intel that suggests that it's not under rubble.
It's still there. It's still there. Sure. Bottom line, and it's not gone yet. And there's no mechanism to get it up. That is just where things stand at this moment.
That's right.
And they continue to shoot some missiles here and there.
And they still have nuclear capabilities.
That's it for today, guys. What do you think about Trump's catering truck escape? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you liked it, please hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next video.